Alright, I would like you to take a look at this. Just look at this. This is happening to Jewish videos that are authentically Jewish. You don't see this happening to Zionist videos. And one of the reasons why I think this is happening is this has to do with the Christian evangelical myth of a Jewish race. The belief in such a Jewish race, I would like to point out, is completely anti-Semitic. There are different dimensions of anti-Semitism. The most obvious is that anti-Semitism is both Judeophobia as well as Islamophobia, but it's also the belief in a Jewish race or Jewish ethnicity. And the term ethnicity, as mentioned by the Jewish Labor Bund, the Jewish Bundesdiaspora movement, the term ethnic or the ethnicity refers to the as heredity, continuation of a people, and this is a term we refer to as opposed to race, because there is no race. That's why we shun these DNA tests and everything, because there is no race. There's no such thing as a pure race. There's ethnic groups. Just like Elizabeth Warren is not Cherokee. She wasn't raised Cherokee. She wasn't brought up in Cherokee tradition. And then if you want to go by ethnic blood or whatever, and I suppose heredity sometimes has to do with blood, but it really has more to do with a continuation. Sometimes geographically, sometimes through dieting, but we know what ethnicity is. Ethnicity is the continuation of a people. Elizabeth Warren does not have the Cherokee ethnicity. Even if she has a little bit of DNA that's identified as Cherokee, it doesn't mean anything. One of the things that's getting really frustrating is the constant talking about Jewish DNA. There's no such thing. Okay? I think one of the other issues we have here is people keep confusing the Jewish people as the ancient Israelites, which is nonsensical. Yes, there are Jewish people that can, I suppose, genetically trace themselves back to the 12 tribes. However, most Jewish people cannot, and most of those people who would be of the 12 tribes have converted to different religions, have no Jewish consciousness, no Jewishness, no Jewish faith, and one of the things that's very sad about this is what is stated here at first. They describe Judaism. That's fine. But then they say those who are descendant from the ancient Jewish people, which implies the 12 tribes. And that's crap. So you see this first part here. Now, let's zoom in further. There's quite a few things I'd like to say about this as we've zoomed in here. So, instead of Jewish, it says Jew. Now, the word Jew is not always that offensive per se. However, it typically is offensive. So let me explain something. This is bad English. English, very bad. We prefer to use, by the way, British English when using stuff. Like when we refer to what most Americans would call potato chips, we'll refer to them as crisps. When we refer to French fries, we're going to say chips. But that's not the point. That's not what I'm referring to. I'm referring to bad English. It should be Jewish instead of Jew. It should be Jewish people or Jewry instead of Jews. So a lot of people say Jew in the singular, and it should be Jewish in the singular. And a lot of people say Jews in the Jews in the plural, and so Jew in the singular and Jews in the plural. When it really should be Jewish in the singular and Jewish people in the plural, or when that's too long-winded, Jewry in the plural. And this is very important because of the way the term Jew is used. Now, look at this for a second. This is a 6-point star, and it says Jew right next to it in the darker letters. Now, I have a hard time not seeing, a patch being slapped on me, because this isn't put on Zionist videos. No, you're seeing this happen on things that are authentically Jewish in a cultural context or a religious context. What is Judaism? Judaism is a cultural religion. Here's the sad part. Judaism is not the only cultural religion. Hinduism is a cultural religion, but you don't see anything like this placed on the Hindus. Now let's see what this says. Jew, Hebrew, Yehudi. Okay, whoa. I mean, this is getting like, okay. So yeah, Yehudi is the Hebrew word for Jewish, not Jew. It's the Hebrew word for Jewish. There's no Jew. It's Jewish. Yehudi, translated in English, it shouldn't be Jew. It should be Jewish. But whatever. Jew, Hebrew, Yehudi. I'll correct that. Jewish, Hebrew, Yehudi. Okay, Yehudi would be the Hebrew word for this. Yes, just as the Hebrew word, if the Hebrew word for Jewish would be Yehudi, the Yiddish word for Jewish would be Yiddish. Anyway, any person whose religion is Judaism. Okay, that's correct. However, it says in the broader sense the term a Jew is a person belonging to a worldwide group that constitutes through the descent or conversion a continuation of the ancient Jewish people. Okay, actually, this is not a good description. If your mother is Jewish, then you are Jewish, or if you've converted to Judaism, particularly through the Orthodox, you're Jewish. And I'm not saying that Reform, Reconstructionist, and Conservative Judaisms are invalid. We actually do acknowledge them, but we prefer to embrace the Orthodox context for protection reasons of identity. Of one must be authentic, so we seek the conversion through the Orthodox. We particularly recognize the ultra-Orthodox. We'd like to recognize the modern Orthodox. Part of the Bundist agenda is to take back control of the modern Orthodox, and through that be able to also outreach not just to Jewish people who have nowhere to go for religious and cultural means, but also to outreach to the conservative, the reform, and the reconstructionist. We are going to have to, in order to do that, we have to strangle Zionist control over the modern Orthodox institutions, and we will. In fact, I think this is why we're seeing this right now. Now, here's another thing. Look at the star also is blue. It's Israeli blue. This happens all the time. You go into, you look up online, this is just how much we are not represented correctly. Blue, Israeli color blue. Wow, that's amazing. I don't see how this isn't taken down, but except for the part where no. Because let's see, if Zionists can march in lockstep with neo-Nazis on the streets, then that makes sense. I mean, fortunately in Arizona now, we're not going to get in trouble if any of us are with BDS, but we were up against that threat here in Arizona, and we thought we were going to definitely be slammed down because Arizona is the #1 place for human trafficking. It's got a large anti-Semitic presence. Of course, it also has a large Bohemian presence on the flip side, so that was good. But do you notice that dissent against Israel is taboo, but it's becoming acceptable to attack Jewish character? Now, one of the things I'm going to clarify again is a Jewish atheist still has Judaism. Do you understand? Because Judaism is a cultural religion. We are of the Torah culture, and we belong to a religious covenant. And even if one is not observant, that doesn't even make the person secular. That just means not observant. And also there are different levels of observance. The way the Bundists, how we do it today, the way we interpret Reform Judaism, Conservative Judaism, Reconstructionist Judaism, the way we interpret that is just different levels of observance. Orthodox is full observance. Ultra-Orthodox is like super observant, we would say, and we would take, if someone who was Jewish ultra-Orthodox wanted to join the Jewish Bundist diaspora movement, we of course would let them in completely with open arms. We'd probably even give such a person a high position for education reasons, because we all want to be equal, but we all need to be educated to do that. So we have vanguards of education system that we're running here. However, it's not likely that the ultra-Orthodox would join us, and we don't require that. Especially because we can't say that we represent all the Jewish people, but there is supposed to be a consensus of who the leaders of our generation are, and we've already said Neturei Karta. And so Neturei Karta being separate from the Bundists is actually useful. Besides, we would see it as part of our position to protect Neturei Karta, and not just Neturei Karta, but pretty much all of the ultra-Orthodox sects of Jewish people, with the exception of Chabad. We really don't care what happens to Chabad for the most part. Now, if they face anti-Semitic attacks, of course, then we care. But the question, but then it depends even then, because they're not really Jewish. Chabad has not been Jewish. So, like, if somebody's attacked in the Messianic Judaism, they're Messianic Jewish, we'll ask, well, is the person's mother Jewish or whatever, but we really don't care too much about what happens to Messianic Judaism. Actually, we do. We would like to see it shut down because it's a direct affront to us. Just as much as Zionism is an affront to the Jewish people, so is Chabad, and so is Messianic Judaism, or Jews for Jesus, or whatever. Because in Judaism, there's no concept of Jesus being the Messiah or the Savior. The most you can say is some people believe that he was at the equivalent of Daniel the dreamer. And by the way, in Judaism, Daniel's not a prophet, he's a dreamer. And maybe Jesus might have been at that equivalent. And that gets into theological matters. So I'm going to point out something. One of the reasons why people are confused about the Jewish people is because Judaism is a cultural religion. And people ask, well, how are there atheists? How are there agnostics? Because if your mother's Jewish, you remain Jewish so long as you're upheld to the Torah culture. A belief in God takes actual belief, okay? All those who are Jewish believe in the Torah culture. All those who are Jewish are married into a religious covenant, okay? We have to start understanding religiosity is about orientation. It doesn't necessarily mean you believe or not believe in God. So there's Jewish people of a theological position. I would say that that applies more to the ultra-Orthodox Jewish people than anybody. Myself, I'm not necessarily theological, I'm mystical. I don't believe in science, but I have association with scientists. Take Dr. Abraham Weisfeld. He is a scientist, and a very good one for that matter. So people say, well, what do you think of creation science? It's anti-Semitic. I'm going to say it for what it is. Because if you're going to truly be theological, you're going to do it the way the ultra-Orthodox do it. Dinosaur bones don't exist. That's how they say it. They're hoaxes, they're whatever. I have a joke that I say dinosaur bones were put there by scientists to confuse us. It's a joke I say. I don't mean it. It's a joke, but I really don't care about dinosaur bones. You could show all the scientific proof you want to me that they're there, and I'm like, okay, that's useless facts to me. But when you get into facts, I would go to a scientist on certain matters. So I cannot be bothered with creation science. Now, why isn't creation scientists being tagged on YouTube for pseudoscience? Why aren't you putting this on Hindus? Because they're a nation. If you get into it, a lot of Hindus identify as a nation. But I guess the confusion is that India is a nation. No, India is a country with several ethnic groups and several religious groups, and it's been there for a long time. There are Buddhists in India. There are Sikhs in India. There are Sikhs, Buddhists, and Jains in India, not just Hindus. There's Jewish people in India, and Muslims and Christians in India. There are different ethnic backgrounds that have been there for a long time in India, and different religious backgrounds that have been there for a long time in India. India is a country. Hindus, many of them identify as a nation, and by the definition of Hinduism being a cultural religion, there is a Hindu nation. And the more the Hindus start to realize that, the better it's going to be, because the more we start to realize that about ourselves, that, oh, we're a cultural religion, therefore we are a type of nation. Yeah. But, the nation state wants to crack down on the people nations, for reasons that should be obvious. But just look at this nonsense. Jew, Hebrew, Yehudi. Okay, it's Jewish, the Hebrew word is Yehudi. The Hebrew word for Jewish is Yehudi. So when you take the word Yehudi, you don't translate it as Jew, you translate it as Jewish. When you take the word Yehudim, which is plural, it shouldn't be translated Jews, it should be translated Jewish people or Jewry. You use the term Jewry if Jewish people is too long-winded. Now, okay, that's fine. A lot of Jewish people still say Jew and Jewish, and they don't necessarily mean offensive. That's fine. But what really is disturbing is where it goes further is to say a Jew is a Jew is any person belonging to the worldwide group that constitutes through descent or conversion. No, through conversion or through a Jewish mother. I mean, descent maybe through a long line of Jewish mothers, but they start to slowly go murky here. A connection to the ancient Jewish people. What the heck does that mean? Because the way they're describing this is the 12 tribes. I mean, I'm going to go, let's zoom in further to get into this. And just recall that it says Jew with a 6-point star. That reminds me of the Holocaust. See, you can get away with being anti-Semitic. Alex Jones, we've been robbed of the right to argue with Alex Jones. You realize that? This is scary. Alex Jones was not the worst. What about David Duke? What about Glenn Beck? You know, this whole thing with pages disappearing from Facebook and people being censored on YouTube, and then this have to be inserted to the leaders of our generation, to Terry Carter, and they're doing it to True Torah Jews as well, just so you know. And despite our disagreements with the True Torah Jews, those guys are ultra-Orthodox, they're completely kosher, leave them alone. Let them speak on defense of Jewish piety against Israel speaking for them, because in that sense we agree with them. You know, see, doing this is anti-Semitic. All right, now look at this. This is from Britannica, I believe, or whatever. Jew people. It should be Jewish people. Why Jew? Why not Jewish? It's Jew people? No, it's Jewish people. That drives me nuts. And maybe it really just drives me nuts because of the star and the fact that it has to be the Israeli star. You know, the 6-point star, there's nothing wrong with it, but you know, insinuating Israeli meaning we're connected to the state of Israel. It's almost subliminal. And people are like, oh, there are no subliminal messages. Yes, there are. There are definitely subliminal messages. That's how capitalism works. Capitalism is the primary root to pretty much most of the ills in society right now. And this is marketing. It's just, gosh, I really... Anyway. Written by the editors. Yeah. Last updated September 5th, 2018. Well, you should re-edit it again. Whoa, whatever. Jew, Hebrew. Yeah, so anyway, we read through this part. Jew, Hebrew, any person whose religion is Judaism. And that's not too bad, but then it goes in the broader sense, you know, of term. A Jew is any person belonging to a worldwide group that constitutes through descent or conversion. Again, maybe through Jewish mothers, because it's either your mother's Jewish or you've converted to Judaism. A culmination of the ancient Jewish people who themselves are descendants of the Hebrews. Okay, no. Okay. The ancient Israelites, or the 12 tribes of Israel, okay, most of them have converted to different religions. And most Jewish people have no connection to the ancient Israelites. And here's another issue here. One of the reasons why we will never accept the Israelis calling themselves Israeli is for two factors. Because when you say Israeli, you could be implying the 12 tribes, which is not accurate. And then you could be implying those of Israel, meaning Israel being the entire Jewish people. So we reject that term. Now, the Marvin Eliyahu came up with the word Lizroidi, which is in our primary documentary, and there's some post-Zionists who came up with the word Medinati, but we've settled on the term Hebrew, which itself could be seen as controversial, but that's better than saying Jewish or Israel or Judah or Judea. These words would be, saying Hebrew would be better, because technically they're speaking a new version of Hebrew. And it is a new version of Hebrew, by the way. It's not connected to Old Hebrew, which is a liturgical language that applies to the scriptures. Jewish people never spoke Hebrew because there is no Hebrew. Hebrew is a liturgical, mystical language. If you get into its history, it's an encryption, it's an encoded language. Jewish people spoke Aramaic. And Aramaic was probably not called Aramaic back in the old periods of where these languages arose. And Jewish Aramaic would have been very similar to Hebrew. The difference would have been Jewish Aramaic would have had a lot larger vernacular, a lot larger vocabulary, because true ancient Hebrew has always had a limited language because of what it's for. Ancient Hebrew is in fact a mystical language. It is a ritual language. It's the holy language. Loshen Kodesh. Holy language. The Jewish language is Yiddish. And let's also point something else out here. What's really awesome about the Bundist movement, we proclaim the Yiddish language to be the Jewish language, and on top of that, unlike the Zionists who wanted to wipe out Yiddish, we don't want to wipe out Judo-Spanish or Judo-Arabic. We would like to see both of those languages preserved. In fact, any Jewish sub-languages that exist, or any Jewish languages that were prominent at one time, we would like to see completely preserved.
That's another difference between us and the Zionists. The Bundists, Zionists perceive themselves as an antidote to this disease of Judaism. We don't see it that way at all. To us, we seek to augment Judaism. But the repression of the Jewish Bund is a necessity to a lot of Zionists because we never really disappeared. We've just been repressed. But anyway, let's continue here. It says, continuation of the ancient Jewish people who themselves descendants of the Hebrews of the Bible, Old Testament. Why does it have to say Old Testament? Why can't it say Tanakh? I mean, this is through obvious Christian evangelical lenses, once again. Puritan crap, the root of Zionism, which was never Jewish. To be fair, isn't authentically really Christian either, but it is a type of Christian. It's the Protestants, the worst type of Protestants, the Puritans, which today are the Baptists, and the Pentecostals, and the Evangelicals, and the non-denominational nutjobs, and the Sabbatean Christians, such as rackets like Messianic Judaism or Jews for Jesus or Seventh-day Adventists. Yeah, I went there. We go there. We go to because there's nothing bigoted about going against a group that's misrepresenting you when we have roots. We have roots to history, okay? So yeah, we have ties back to Palestine. We have ties back to Iran. We have ties throughout the entire diaspora, which would include Palestinians. And those people we would rather refer to, and as, by the way, it's not just us who have said, hey, Israelis, you can't call yourself Israeli. A lot of these people who are known as Israelis, they are referring to themselves now as Hebrews. There's a lot of dissent in the apartheid Zionist state of Israel, and a lot of them don't want to be referred to as Israeli. A lot of them want to be referred to as Hebrews. So here's the thing. Some of the post-Zionist rivals that we had back some few years back wanted to say, and a lot of them were from Israel. They said, well, let's change Israeli to Medinati. And, Marvin Eliyahu, who is one of us in the Jewish Bundist diaspora movement, he said, let's call it Lizroidi, and he was from Israel, so he had the right to say that. But we're coming to the exception of calling them Hebrews, which is okay, because what was the name of the plan for the Federation? The Palestinian Hebrew Democratic Federation. So, there you go, Hebrews. But in the contents of the Hebrews, that meaning the people of Abraham, this would have to include the Arabs. So there's a serious problem with this, instead of referring to themselves as descendant of Hebrews. Do we refer to Muslims that way, by the way? Do we? No, we don't. We're going to say descendants of the Hebrews when we speak of the Muslims. Do we say all the Christians are Greek and all the Greeks are Christian? Because, the Christian Bible is written in Greek. It is. The New Testament is written in Greek, and the Christian Old Testament is known as the Septuagint, which is translated from Hebrew, but it was the first time the Jewish scriptures were translated into a text that was not Hebrew, was the Greek text. And, the Christians adopted it. But whatever. I mean, this is so Euro-centric, so centric, so it's like central to Christendom. That's what really bothers. That's what's so bothersome to us when we see things like this. This is just typical. Not even Christian supremacy. This is typical Western Christian supremacy. Usually of a evangelical nature, whether you see it or not, by the way. I mean, Catholics, we still have friction with them, but we have more Catholic. There are Catholics that would sympathize with what I'm saying. Are there any evangelicals that will? Not one single evangelical would emphasize with the thing I'm saying right here. So it says, Hebrews of the Old Testament, whatever. In ancient times, a Yehudi was originally a member of Judah. There's a big cultural genocide going on. And what really sucks, what really hurts the most, is I'm not yet at liberty to say this, but I'm compelled to, which now means I have to go into acceleration to produce a lot of texts that I've had semi-access to for a while, but it's hard because I'm not a Hebraist very well. I don't understand Aramaic very well. It would take a lot of knowledge of that, and I'm still trying to touch up on Judo-Spanish and Yiddish, which is difficult. But there are texts which refer to someone from the tribe of Judah. Did you know that a person from the tribe of Judah is not called a Yehudi? He's a Yehudahi. Yehudahi. Because Judah, in Hebrew,
is Yehuda. And if you are of the tribe of Yehuda, you are a Yehuda-hi. The secret to the word Yehudi is that it's spelled Yod, He, Vov, Daled. Why? Why is it done that way? Because the fourth letter would be He, but nobody pronounces that word. So if you're saying one from Hashem, one from the name that is forbidden to speak, you just replace the second He with a Dalet. So a Yehudi is one of Yehud, the forbidden name. That's also why we say Hashem whenever we reference God. And I'm getting frustrated trying to bring up God here because Bundism is a political movement. But when we face this dimension, we are not afraid to bring up religion. It's just that we would rather not go there. But here's the thing. To the Zionists, to the people who want to say that those who are against Israel are anti-Semitic, when actually the state of Israel is part of anti-Semitism, if anything, we would like to say to all you numbskulls out there, the Jewish people, our consciousness is waking up, you're scared of us, and you're also scared of the fact that we've been reaching out to the Marxist-Leninists and that they've been reaching out to us, which was never seen before because everybody knows that Marxist-Leninists and Bundists didn't have a good connection. You are scared of Dr. Abraham Weisfeld, who knew the best of the Trotskyists, not the crazy Trotskyite that scares pretty much almost every revolutionary, but the real intellectual Trotskyist. Dr. Abraham Weisfeld, he knows them. They know him. They vouched for him recently in a meeting, okay? You're scared of me because I actually do know a lot of people, and I know how to fight the propaganda against Stalin. I am capable, as it's been proven now 4 times, in the public forums in downtown Phoenix, that bridges can be built for the Jewish Bund and the Marxist-Leninists. You're scared of that. You're scared that I can speak logically because the fiendish Bolshevik has woken people up to know that, yeah, the identity politics, although misused by liberals, is good because he brought up the Black Panthers. And, he doesn't speak well of the Bund because he doesn't know the Bund. But I guarantee what you don't want is for me to talk to somebody like the fiendish Bolshevik. You don't want us to have a debate. You don't want me to have a debate with the guy on Maoist Rebel News. You don't want Bad Mouse to come back and probably debate me. That's what you're really scared of because we're already connected to the ultra-Orthodox. And what are you going to do when we're connected to the Marxist-Leninists and the very best of the anarchists as well? What are you really going to do then? You're scared of that. You're scared of a united revolutionary socialist front. You can put up with the democratic socialists like Chris Hedges who have pie-in-the-sky arguments, but you can't deal with revolutionaries. You're scared of us. You're scared that the Marxist-Leninists might acknowledge our national cultural autonomy, which they hadn't in the past, because we can provide a proper argument. You're scared that more of us are aware of who Stalin was. You're scared that Trotskyists and Marxist-Leninists could join forces, and you know that we're the ones that would bring that together. You're scared. That is why you're doing this. But you won't do it to a Zionist, because you need the Zionists. The state of Israel serves the interest of America, and so they will let Israel get away with all kinds of things. That's how Americanism works. Americanism needs Zionism, and Zionism needs Americanism, but let's just face it. This is all about imperialist capitalism in the end, isn't it? You can't let the religion of the slaves, the culture of the liberated people, the Jewish people, run amok, can you? You can't deal with a diaspora group of people who want to educate people. That scares you, because you know that civilization's ability for the people to demand to speak themselves largely came from the Jewish outcry. That scares you. I'm getting off track. But it says, in ancient times, a Yehudi was originally a member of Judah. Okay, no, again, Yehudi comes from the term Yehuda. Yehudi doesn't come from Yehuda. The Yehuda being the tribe of Judah. The Hebrew word for Judah is Yehuda. But the Hebrew word for Judite, or, someone from the tribe of Judah, is Yehuda-hi. Now, even though this is not as well known, I know this. You haven't wiped it. This is what another thing I would like to say. If you want to know which one has more prominence of heredity back to the tribe of Judah, Who do you think it is? Is it the Sephardim or the Ashkenazim? The answer is the Ashkenazim. Despite all the Khazar, by the way, it's okay to put Khazarian myths, lies about Khazarian, people infiltrated. Never mind the fact that there's no Jewish race or Jewish ethnic group. It's just Jewish groups. It's just ethnic groups that are predominantly Jewish. That's all you have, pretty much. Like the Ashkenazim, the Sephardim, the Mizraim. The Mizraim, by the way, do have DNA that goes back to ancient Israel, as do several of the Ashkenazim. Not much among the Sephardim. A lot of people don't know that. The reason why a lot of people think the Sephardim are more pure is because it's the Sephardim that cultivated and preserved archaic Judaism. Any Jewish groups, by the way, who rejected Shabbat Tzipsi, a false messiah character, by the way, were of the Sephardim. But the only thing that people speak about among Sephardim, who? Maimonides, the Rambam, or perhaps those who are behind the writing of the Zohar. And being as this is, the Sephardim did so much more than that. Archaic Judaism lived through the Sephardim, and that's what people are afraid of, because there are texts that actually state that Yehudi refers to one of Yehud, because the Hebrew word for Judite, or one of the tribe of Judah, is Yehudahi. So this whole text is misleading. Zionism has been very important to provide cultural genocide. Just look at this insanity. Of the 12 tribes that took possession of the Promised Land or subsequent kingdom of Judah. Okay, Judah was the remnant, that's true, but in contrast to the rival kingdom Israel to the north, no one really knows for sure what happened to Israel, but what survives of, and by the way, in the context of Israel, I don't mean the entire Jewish people, and I don't mean the state of Israel. We're talking about the 10 tribes here. So let's be clear about this. The context that they mean for the kingdom of Israel referring to the 10 tribes, which, by the way, guess what, are undisputably the Palestinians. Because when they took out the 10 tribes, they didn't wash out all the people. They took out the leadership. Those that remained today would be the Palestinians. In fact, another factor here is that I don't know where a lot of these Christians come from. Again, these aren't really necessarily Christians as we would understand Christianity. These are usually people of a super Protestant fringe, such as evangelicals. They speak of, well, Israel was Jesus' land. No, Jesus was from Galilee, and Judea and Galilee were the countries that existed. And what is Judea and Galilee today? Palestine. So any of you Christians who claim to care about your own heritage, you should be for Palestine. And I guess it's because a lot of Christians think that they want to be pro-Jewish, but if you want to be pro-Jewish, you should be against Israel. This is just the economy of all this confusion, and I'm going off track again, but this is just obscene, what we are looking at here. The fact that this is auto-generated the way that it is, it's painful. It says the Jewish people as a whole, initially called Hebrews, Ivrim, which in the context they're talking about would have to include, by the way, the Ishmaelite Arabs, but whatever, were known as Israelites, Yisraelim. You know, actually, the term Yisraeli does not happen in the Jewish scriptures, but it does pertain to later Jewish texts. But what would the Yisraeli be? Or the Israeli? The Palestinians. Because here's another problem. The term, and the reason why I'm bringing this up is because I'm now compelled to bring up something that I'm not ready to bring forth, but I don't have a choice, much of anything. I guess the only thing I have is I'm riding on my credibility as that I've never deceived people on these areas. So, okay, Israeli, or Israelis, refers to heredity. It refers to those with ethnic background to the 12 tribes, or possibly the 10 tribes if you take away Judah and Benjamin. Now, that's the Palestinians again. I've already clarified this. Yisraelim. And by the way, there's texts that refer to Israeli or Yisraeli in the correct context as separate from Judaism. And I think that that's because there are hopes that the 12 tribes would all reconvert back to Judaism. Or whatever. Just like but and then maybe that will happen one day. Anybody can convert to Judaism if it's pursued well enough and within reason, as we state on the website. But maybe one day but you know what? Maybe one day all Ishmaelite Arabs will convert to Islam, and maybe one day all the Greeks will convert to Christianity. Although most Greeks are Christian, in fact, and a lot of Arabs. There are more Arabs that are, I would say, Jewish than there are Christian, but there's definitely more Muslims that are Arab. And Arab DNA really is connected to Palestinian DNA, and Palestinian DNA is connected to Ashkenazi DNA, but not so much Sephardi DNA. And that's a factor here that it's just ridiculous. There are ethnic groups that are predominantly Jewish, and I'm just now being repetitive and very repetitive, but you can see throughout this is bad. It's really bad. From the time of the Holy Land, the biblical exile, therefore the term Yehudi, Latin Judaeus. This is so indoctrinated. This is they're peddling half truths here. I guess they're getting the what's the word, etymology or whatever, partially correct, but they're leaving out a whole bucket load of information, and that's on purpose, I think, because I later found out that there were people that dealt in antiquities and information that I thought that I had rare texts on my hands, and it's just, no, they're just suppressed because they don't want people to realize that, oh, ancient Israelites mostly converted to different religions, and Judaism is religion, and therefore the state of Israel might be completely invalid. Wait, it is completely invalid. But then, they want to know, like, but why do you have all these customs and everything? Because it's a cultural religion, and it's not the only one. And then that gets into another factor, is that nations need to be defended without borders. That diaspora nations exist, and have always existed. There are diaspora nations or people nations like the Romani, often referred to as gypsies, but the term is Romani. They're ethnic and cultural. Black people, descendants of slaves, they're ethnic and cultural. But then you also have those that are religious and cultural, such as the Hindus, or the Byzantine Catholics, or the Jewish people. And that is not something that nationalists want to be said. And nationalism is, intertwined with capitalism. So, there's an obvious agenda. The nation state has to put its boot upon the faces of people nations. Because, well, it's about repression, it's obvious. Let my people go. Moses said, let my people go. We have a new pharaoh today. It's the nation state and capitalism. Therefore, the term Yehudi, this is ridiculous, English Jew. No, English Jewish. You see that right there? German, Juden, whatever, and English Jew. It's Jewish, whatever. Was used significantly all inheritance of Judaism because of the survivors of the exile. I can't believe this is considered academic, because this would not, in my eyes, I would not say, I would say that this cannot pass from an academic point of view, or a theological point of view, and from a mystical point of view, I'm just going to say as more of a mystical perspective, I'm just offended. And by the way, the Zohar is not the only mystical text. I don't favor the Zohar. There are other mystical Jewish texts that, in fact, that would even be considered Kabbalah. Yeah, but whatever. At any time, you can pause this and watch this for yourself. And look and read through this. But I've already outlined for you what's wrong with it. Now I'm going to switch to something most epic that happened this year. I am going to show you a small clip of Dr. Abram Weisfeld. This is very important. I would say that it's, it's just epic. Epic is the word that comes to my mind whenever I see this. I've seen this several times, and we're going to provide you with this clip here. And, I'm about to play it right now. This was published, by the way, on March 17th of this year, 2018. And you're going to see that there's no contradiction between what I say and what Dr. Avram Weisfeld is saying in this film. Again, the best words to describe this would be epic.
هنا عشان نزرع الشجر. انتم بتزرعوا الموت. انتم بتقتلوا اطفالنا. انتم محتلين وهذا البلد بلدنا. هذا البلد بلدنا مش بلدكم. لازم ترحلوا من هنا انتم. انتم مجرمين. انتم قتلة. انتم بتحموا المستوطنين اللي هنا. هذه صار يجب ان ترحل والاحتلال يجب ان يرحل. احكوا لنتنياهو هذه الارض فلسطينيه. شو بتساووا انتم هنا؟ شو بتساوي؟ هذه ارض فلسطينيه مش الكم. هذه البلد بلدنا والصهيوني شردنا.
خلص زيتنا من هنا. رسالتنا اقوى. رسالتنا اقوى منهم.
محتلين مجرمين.
محتلين مجرمين.
تركوا ارضك يا فلسطين.
تركوا ارضك يا فلسطين.
Weißt du nicht, die bist nicht Kaiden. Die bist Zionim. You are not Jewish. You are Zionist. Do you understand? You don't understand anything because you have never been to a real school. You have only been to indoctrination. You only have been to a Zionist school. You have never been to a Jewish school. You've never been to a Cheder. You've never been to a Talmud Torah. Die weiß gut nicht. Was weiß die von alles? Gut nicht. Ich bin für den jüdischen Bund. Meine Brüder von meiner Mitte ist gewähne Partisane. Keine die Faschisten. Und was machst die? Die machst faschistische Sachen. Dann ist Arbeit, ist eine faschistische Arbeit. A kleine Kippa. Sehr klein, sehr klein. Very small kippa, because you are very small Jewish. That's why. You are not Jewish. You are Zionist. I know. I am from the Jewish Bund. My mother's brother was a partisan who fought against fascism, Nazism. You don't know what it is to be a partisan, because you are making fascism. You are working for the illegal settlement of Yitzhar.
وهم هدول بزرعوا الموت. هذول المجرمين. هذول الارهابيين. احنا جايين نقول هذا البلد بلدنا والصهيوني شردنا. هذا الجندي المجرم الحقير بدم الفلسطينيين.
You see, the Palestinians understand what it is to be Jewish. You don't know what it is to be Jewish. Yes.
We shall overcome. We shall overcome. It is our land. It is not belong to you.
Yes. Did you ever go to fight for a Jewish land in Europe? No, nothing. Nothing. You do nothing for the Jewish people. Here you come and take the land of others who were one time Israelites. And you talk about the 10 lost tribes. Here, you can find them right here. You don't know anything. Go to university and not to the military.
In closing, I would like to say that we in the Jewish Bundesdiaspora movement have never, ever endorsed the Democrat Party, the corporatized American media, whether you're talking about the Fox News conservative or the CNN, SNBC liberal or whatever. It's all really, really bad propaganda. In fact, I would say that some of the worst, most bias slanted and omitted, the type of news that would omit, I'm talking about yellow journalism or whatever, however you would say it, like the most fictional news would definitely be American corporatized media. However, what's sad is that it was Donald Trump, who runs tabloids, said this before we could say this more publicly. And that he has pretty much said to kill journalists and stuff like that. And it is highly unlikely that I just hope the Russians don't get blamed for this, because all this Russophobia is becoming really annoying. But I think that Trump supporters sent these bombs off. And another factor that I'm going to say here is, as much as I don't like George Soros, why the obsession with George Soros and not Bill Gates? And I'm not saying either of them are really good people, but, you know, George Soros is nothing compared to Bill Gates when it comes to messed upness in the capitalist world. You put all these capitalists together, what, you're going to find maybe 1, 2, 3 Jewish guys in there? I mean, we're talking about the top capitalists, not competitors in the ground of Wall Street, but the big guys in Wall Street who, you know, who are set. Usually like a couple of them, maybe a handful of them are Jewish, almost all of them are not Jewish. You know, the most prominent shares in the Federal Reserve belong to Chase Bank, which is run by the Rockefellers. There's nothing Jewish about the Rockefellers. They've never been Jewish. Ever. In fact, they're Southern Baptists. This is known. I really think that it's a sad position, because really the truth is the President of the United States currently has a president that encouraged the violence against journalists. And so there was an attempt to blow up CNN. There you know, was an attempt to kill the Clintons, to kill Obama. This is terrible. And now they're saying it's a false flag. I don't know if that's the case. I've met a lot of Trump supporters that are extremely violent. So I don't believe it's a false flag. The only thing that could possibly happen is that the liberal side of the media might say it was the Russians secretly. And in that case, then it would be a false flag. I can guarantee that, because that's just crap. The Russians can't afford to do things like that. And the Russians aren't benefiting from the Republicans any more than they are from the Democrats. Let's be clear here. I mean, they definitely don't want their press to be censored. They need to continue to have world news, because Russia has its problems. I'm very critical of Vladimir Putin, but I'm also a massive supporter. My first criticism of Vladimir Putin is that he is a conservative, and that he is a capitalist, and that he is definitely not a socialist. But I'll give him this, he actually is a conservative. American leadership does not have conservatives or liberals. We don't have liberals, we don't have conservatives. Conservatives are non-interventionists. The liberals are open to all sides, but today liberals in America are the most intolerant people you'll ever meet, and conservatives are extreme interventionists. So there is no liberals and conservatives. In fact, I would say that another thing that's a factor here is that liberals and conservatives are now both right-wing, whereas before the liberals were centrist and the conservatives were right-wing, but now the liberals and the conservatives are both right-wing, and now the progressives are the new centrists. It's just a crazy change that's occurred here, and yet they call the Democrats liberal to be left-wing and the conservative Republican to be right-wing. That's not reality. That's not the history of the left-right paradigm. The left-right paradigm has always referred to the right wing being completely establishment, and the center being reform, and then the left wing being completely anti-establishment, as in revolutionary, as in not liberal, as in socialist. That's always what it's been, and it's been that way since the French Revolution. I'm not so sure everybody would have called themselves socialists back then. But, I mean, there were socialists back then, regardless of what Marxists and anarchists may claim. But there were socialists back then. I'm not so sure that the French Revolution would have been socialist, but it would have been patriotic. And true patriotism, not necessarily nationalism, but French patriotism? Are you kidding? That was quite the achievement. That was left-wing. Or at least the attempt was left-wing. You finally get a centrist solution with Napoleon, but whatever. It is what it is. That's the paradigm for you. The old guard was right-wing, Napoleon was the center, and the revolution was the left. If you understand French, and I don't mean the French language, but if you understand where the left-right paradigm comes from, this terminology came from the revolution. Why is the right wing the bad guys or the establishment? Because the divine right of kings, or the claim of the monarchies at the time, was that they were the right hand of God, and so those that were opposed to them were the left hand known as Satan. It goes back to a Christian-centric, a Western Christian-centric point of view. Now, if by any chance the fiendish Bolshevik is listening, I have this just for you, buddy.
Summer in nothing wrong, summer in